2 Kings. Chapter 4. Now a certain woman from among the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, saying, Your servant my husband is dead, and you know that your servant feared Jehovah. And the creditor has come to take my 2 children to himself as servants. And Elisha said to her, What shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in your house? And she said, Your servant has nothing at all in the house, except a jar of oil. And he said, Go and borrow vessels outside, from all your neighbors, empty vessels, and not just a few. Then go in and shut the door behind you and your sons, and pour out into all those vessels, and each one you fill set aside. So she went away from him and shut the door behind herself and her sons, and they brought the vessels to her, and she poured out into them. And when she had filled the vessels, she said to her son, Bring me another vessel. But he said to her, There is no other vessel. And the oil stopped. And she went and told the man of God. And he said, Go and sell the oil, and pay your debt, and you and your sons can live off the rest. And one day Elisha was passing through Shunem, and there was a wealthy woman there, who compelled him to have a meal. So whenever he passed through, he would turn aside and have a meal there. And she said to her husband, Now I know that this man who continually passes through unto us is a holy man of God. Let us make a little walled upper room and put a bed and a table and a chair and a lamp for him, and when he comes to us, he can turn aside there. Then one day he came there, and he turned aside into the upper room and lay down there. And he said to Gehazi his attendant, Call this Shunammite. And he called her, and she stood before him. And he said to him, Say to her, You have gone to all this trouble for us, what can be done for you? Should you be spoken of to the king or to the captain of the army? And she said, I dwell in the midst of my people. And he said, What then can be done for her? And Gehazi said, Indeed she has no son, and her husband is old. Then he said, Call her. And he called her, and she stood at the door. And he said, At this time next year you shall embrace a son. And she said, No, my lord, O man of God, do not deceive your servant. And the woman conceived and bore a son at that time the next year, as Elisha had told her. And when the child grew up, one day he went out to his father among the reapers. And he said to his father, My head. My head. And he said to his attendant, Carry him to his mother. And when he had carried him in and brought him to his mother, the child lay upon her lap until noon, then died. And she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, and she shut the door behind him and went out. Then she called her husband and said, Send me one of the attendants and one of the donkeys that I may run to the man of God and return. And he said, Why will you go to him today? It is neither the new moon nor the Sabbath. But she said, It will be fine. Then she saddled the donkey and said to her attendant, Urge the beast, and do not restrain the ride for me unless I tell you. So she went. And she came to the man of God at Mount Carmel. And when the man of God saw her at a distance, he said to Gehazi his attendant, That is the Shunammite over there. Run now to meet her, and say to her, Is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with the child? And she said, It is well. And when she came to the man of God on the mountain, she clung to his feet. And Gehazi approached to pull her away, but the man of God said, Leave her alone, for she is bitter in soul, and Jehovah has hidden from me and has not told me. And she said, Did I ask my Lord for a son? Did I not say, Do not mislead me? Then he said to Gehazi, Gird up your loins, and take my staff in your hand, and go. If you meet anyone, do not greet him, and if anyone greets you, do not respond to him. and lay my staff upon the face of the boy. And the mother of the boy said, As Jehovah lives and as your soul lives, I will not leave you. And he rose up and followed her. And Gehazi passed on before them and set the staff upon the boy's face, but there was no sound or reaction. Therefore he returned to meet him and told him, saying, The boy has not awakened. And when Elisha went into the house, there was the dead boy, laid out on his bed. And he went in and shut the door behind the two of them, and he prayed to Jehovah. Then he got up and lay on the child, and he put his mouth on his mouth and his eyes on his eyes and his palms on his palms, and he stretched himself over him, and the flesh of the child became warm. And he got down and walked about in the house once to and fro. Then he got up and stretched himself over him, and the boy sneezed 7 times. Then the boy opened his eyes. And he called Gehazi and said, Call that Shunammite. So he called her. And when she came to him, he said, Take up your son. And she came and fell at his feet and bowed herself to the ground. And she took up her son and went out. Then Elisha returned to Gilgal, and there was a famine in the land. And the sons of the prophet sat before him. And he said to his attendant, Put on the big pot, and boil some stew for the sons of the prophets. And one went out into the field to gather herbs. And he found a wild vine and gathered from it a lapful of wild gourds. And he came and cut them up into the pot of stew, though they did not know what they were. And they poured out the stew for the men to eat. And while they were eating some of the stew, they cried out and said, O man of God, there is poison in the pot. And they were not able to eat it. And he said, Then bring some flour. And he threw it into the pot and said, Pour it out for the people that they may eat. And there was nothing harmful in the pot. Then a man came from Baal-Shalisha and brought to the man of God bread of the firstfruits, 20 loaves of barley, and fresh ears of grain in his sack. And Elisha said, Give it to the people that they may eat. And his servant said, How can I set this before 100 people? And he said, Give it to the people that they may eat, for thus says Jehovah, They shall eat and have some left. So he set it before them, and they ate, and there was some left, according to the word of Jehovah. 2 Kings Chapter 5. Now Naaman, the captain of the army of the king of Syria, was a great man in the sight of his master and highly respected, because by him Jehovah had given deliverance to Syria. But the man, though a mighty man of valor, was a leper. And the Syrians had gone out in bands and had taken captive a little girl from the land of Israel, and she waited on Naaman's wife. And she said to her mistress, If only my master were with the prophet who is in Samaria. Then he would cure him of his leprosy. And Naaman went in and told his master, saying, Thus and thus did the girl who is from the land of Israel say. Then the king of Syria said, Go then, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel. And he went and took with him 10 talents of silver and 6,000 shekels of gold and 10 changes of clothes. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which read, And now, when this letter comes to you, I am sending Naaman my servant to you, that you may cure him of his leprosy. And when the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, Am I God to put to death and to give life, that this man sends word to me to cure a man of his leprosy? Therefore consider now and see how he seeks an occasion against me. And when Elisha the man of God heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent word to the king, saying, Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel. And Naaman came with his horses and his chariot and stood at the entrance of the house of Elisha. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean. But Naaman became furious and went away and said, I thought, he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of Jehovah his God, and wave his hand over the place and cure the leper. Are not the Abana and the Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in a rage. And his servants came near and spoke to him and said, My father, had the prophet told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then, when he says to you, Wash and be clean? So he went down and dipped in the Jordan 7 times according to the word of the man of God. And his flesh was restored to be like the flesh of a little boy, and he was clean. And he returned to the man of God, he and all his company, and came and stood before him and said, Now I know that there is no God in all the earth except with Israel. And now, please accept a present from your servant. But he said, As Jehovah lives, before whom I stand, I will receive nothing. And Naaman urged him to take it, but he refused. And Naaman said, Then if not, please let your servant be given 2 mule loads of earth, for your servant will no more offer burnt offerings and sacrifices to other gods, but to Jehovah only. In this matter may Jehovah pardon your servant. When my master goes into the house of Rimmon to bow down there and leans on my arm, and I bow down in the house of Rimmon, when I bow down in the house of Rimmon, may Jehovah pardon your servant in this matter. And he said to him, Go in peace. And when he had gone from him a little way, Gehazi, the attendant of Elisha the man of God said, Now my master has spared Naaman this Syrian by not receiving from his hand that which he brought. As Jehovah lives, I will run after him and take something from him. So Gehazi pursued Naaman. And when Naaman saw him running after him, he alighted from the chariot to meet him and said, Is all well? And he said, All is well. My master has sent me, saying, Now at this moment 2 young men from among the sons of the prophets have come to me from the hill country of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of clothes. And Naaman said, Please take 2 talents. And he urged him and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags, with 2 changes of clothes, and gave them to 2 of his attendants, and they carried them before him. And when he came to the hill, he took them from their hand and deposited them in the house. And he sent the men away, and they departed. And he went in and stood before his master. And Elisha said to him, Where have you come from, Gehazi? And he said, Your servant has not gone anywhere. And he said to him, Did not my heart go with you when the man turned from his chariot to meet you? Is it a time to receive silver and to receive clothing and olive groves and vineyards and sheep and oxen and male servants and female servants? Therefore the leprosy of Naaman shall cleave to you and to your seed forever. And he went out from his presence a leper as white as snow.